Good morning. I would like to talk a little bit about the Treaty of Versailles and the possible essay topics that might arise. Regardless of what the essay question is, you have to know all these key details as I have given to you in the PDF. First, conditions surrounding German surrender. Now, this is before the signing of the treaty. You must realize what is Germany's perception. Germany's perception is that it's not only Germany at fault, but the Allies were also responsible for the war. Germany's perception is that they only agreed for an armistice. Armistice is a ceasefire, right? It's just a ceasefire. They only agreed to a ceasefire, and this was heavily influenced by the terms laid out by Woodrow Wilson in his 14 points, in which Germany was not that harshly punished. Alright. Then you have the opposite side of the spectrum, which is the Allied perception. Now, the Allied thought differently. They sincerely believed that Germany had caused and created much destruction during World War II. Millions of people died, mostly the French, and they were killed. The Western Front, which means France and Belgium, mostly France and Belgium, right, had been destroyed. Not only that, the war losses has resulted in France and Britain being bankrupt and in debt after the war. Alright. Then you have Wilson's 14 points. This is the USA's perception of what to do after the war. There should be fair and permanent peace throughout disarmament, and there should be a creation of the League of Nations in order to promote self-determination in the post-war Europe. Finally, we have the outcome, the reality. Okay, the reality of what happened was very different from what the Germans perceived, because the victors indeed were the Allies, and so they were the ones who had the say in the final terms. As a result, this really came as a surprise, as a shock to Germany. The final reality was it was a dictated peace to ensure Germany would not start another war. Does not start another war. So how do you do that? First, you go and invite them. So Germany not invited for negotiation. This means that they were forced to sign a treaty. If not, the Allies will continue fighting. But at that point in time, Germany was already on the brink of defeat. It didn't want to get more losses on the war front. Alright? So that's why they were forced to sign this treaty. And to their surprise, very few of the 14 points in their initial agreement of an armistice was being carried out. Because as you know, Wilson didn't have support of the Senate, didn't have support of the US population, and could not negotiate the terms together with France and Britain, who were more heavily involved and more heavily affected by the war. So the big winners were Britain and France, and not the USA. So most of these 14 points did not make it to the final treaty, and this resulted in much harsher terms. Much harsher terms for Germany, which indirectly caused them great unhappiness and the desire for revenge. As you know, this desire accumulated with the rise of Hitler. Because Hitler is the one that took advantage of the situation. He took advantage of the situation. He took advantage of the anger of the German people. Right? He exploited this anger in order to build up his military, so that one day he can take revenge on Britain, on France, on Russia, right, for their role in causing Germany to sign this treaty. Alright? So he will slowly build up the military. Now, number 2 is the terms of the treaty. This is very straightforward. This is just all the terms that you see in your textbook. Right? War guilt cause is the main one. This is the main one. It's Article 231. The war guilt cause. Hang on. Yeah, Article 231, the war guilt clause. Total blame for starting the war. Okay, then you have your territorial reductions, colonies in Asia and Asia Pacific and Africa. You have all the regions here. You have the loss of rule because Germany could not pay the initial reparations, and so France just marched into the Ruhr region to take the resources, including coal and other goods, making Germany even more weaker than it already is. Demilitarization in order to prevent Germany from starting another war. You have army reduced to 100,000 men, navy to 15,000, and of course no air force tanks and submarines. Reparations, as you know, is the money you need to pay back for the war damages, 6,600 million pounds. Self-determination mostly applied to the people in Austria-Hungary. All of them were given a common identity and a right to govern themselves. Many of these were Germans, alright, who wanted to join back with Germany. But unfortunately, the treaty forbade this because the treaty wanted to keep Germany weak. So, in other parts of Europe, self-determination applied and they could apply to govern themselves. But for Austria-Hungary, for the German-speaking people in Austria-Hungary, they could not reunite back with Germany because they wanted to keep Germany weak. And finally, in order to deal with international affairs, you have the formation of the League of Nations to maintain world peace through collective security and the process of disarmament. This is the objective, alright, of the LN. World peace through disarmament and collective security. And this is also the objective, you could say, because this is included in the terms as well, it also is an objective of the Treaty of Versailles. Alright, we're ending soon. Number 3, you have impact of World War I and the TOV on Germany itself. This is some of the background context information of the treaty. First, we have the economic impact. Why was it so devastating? Okay, because it's the aftermath of the war. You have property and infrastructure being destroyed. You have 15% of the male population lost. What's the significance of this? It's difficult to rebuild the economy. And then, after the treaty was implemented and Germany needed to pay reparations and they could not pay the reparations, then you have France taking over the Ruhr, resulting in a strike from workers. Okay, and finally, you have the loss of industrial territories, referred to the terms of TOV, which clearly lists down all these terms. Finally, political impact. This is more on Germany's standing, right? So standing, they lost their standing among the world powers, which held strongly before the war. Defense-wise, all your military reductions resulted in them being extremely weak and unable to defend itself against the Allied powers. Okay, not only that, they can't defend their borders with France as well because they lost the buffer zone. Okay, the Rhineland is actually the buffer zone in between Germany and buffer zone. Okay, so they lost the Rhineland, which means that they lost their buffer zone. It was made into a international area where the Allies will occupy. And finally, the fourth thing you need to know is the Treaty of Versailles. This is in order to make comparison to say that the Treaty of Versailles was fair. Because when you compare this treaty with the treaty that Germany gave to Russia, this was when Russia surrendered. Okay, in between World War I, Russia surrendered because they turned communist. And so in doing so, they wanted to stop fighting. And so they signed a treaty with Germany to give them land in order that they can be pulled out of the war and focus on rebuilding their own economy, rebuilding their own country as a communist society. So this is just all the comparisons here. Territorial losses, the coal mines, and the population loss. So as you can see here, the Treaty of Versailles was much more severe than the Treaty of Versailles. Alright. So when you write an essay, right, I don't want you to memorize moral essays. Okay, it's more crucial to memorize the important information that you need to know. And all this important information is listed over here. Once you memorize this information, you're going to use it, Okay, depending on the question that they ask, you plug and choose. Pick and choose the relevant information, and then after that, you explain how it fits into your main factor. This is a better way of studying because you never know what question can come out in the O level and in our own exam. Okay? But once you master this skill, you can answer any single question that they throw at you. Alright, because you know how to pick and choose the information and apply it to the factor of your question, which I will go through this in the next video.